Hey, Scott Jordan and Mark Warner for Jancast number 186 for Thursday, March 6th, 2025. March 6th, that means what's that, 15 days away from spring, I think, something like that, 16 days. We're getting close, Mark.
It depends on when our avid listeners download this episode,
That's
right?
right.
Could be the next day. It could be last week.
Yep,
But March 20th is first official day of spring. So
14
I'm
days.
really looking forward to that.
Yep,
Really.
yep,
And
it's
I
changing.
and I'm thrilled, by the way, Scott. We have an amazing guest today.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing guest. I'm like president of the Alejandra Gramajo fan club. And I'm actually taking signups. So anybody want to join, just give me a ring and I'll hook you up to the fan club. It's a whole bunch of us. So anyway, I'm thrilled to have you as a guest today. We're gonna circle back around and talk a little bit with you about some of the things that impact our industry in a big
Yep,
way.
yep,
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
And
yep.
tell everybody that you're an avid Jancast.com listener.
I am. I am. I've been trying to get on it and it finally happened.
There you go. There you go. The numbers are going to spike.
Yes, they will. Well, she's got the magic touch when it comes to social media.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's briefly cover some news and then we can get back to Alejandro. So the biggest thing that I just read about is the app that we used to use to do this show in the very beginning was Skype. And Skype is coming to an end on May 5th. So they're transitioning it over to that fantastic product that everybody loves, Microsoft Teams, right?
Oh.
Yeah. What do you say, Mark, about why everybody loves Teams?
And everybody loves it because it's free as an add-on app to their Microsoft 365. We use Zoom for this broadcast, and
Yeah.
although we pay for it, it's got a lot of other things that you can do with it
Yeah.
that you can't really do with Teams so much. So I tend to prefer Zoom over Teams,
Yeah.
but as you know, as we do what we do in life, I use Teams a lot because other people use Teams a lot.
It kind of depends on who's calling the meeting, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
If the other party's calling the meeting, invariably it's Teams. If we call the meeting, it's Zoom.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
So,
but enough
um,
with that. Skype is dying, so if you have a
well,
Skype phone number, you might want to check into how you change that and all that jazz. That is possible. I think we used to have a Skype phone number for Jancast as well. So supply chain is getting crazy. We talked about trigger sprayers and all that, but I got my samples here from thanks to Alibaba, and we got all that. But man, it's kind of going in the wrong direction as far as supply chain stuff's
well,
concerned.
it brings back memories of what we dealt with in 2020 when COVID first occurred, and then
Yeah.
all the supply chain disruptions then. So, kind of curious what's going to happen. I think some of it's being impacted by maybe some of the tariff stuff too. It might not necessarily be that it's hard to get, but it might cost a lot more.
Yeah, I was informed on the sprayers that it is going to impact the cost, but fortunately they're not worth a lot, so it's only going to be a small increment. It's going to be like 5 cents a sprayer or something like that. It's what they're predicting, but I won't have the final number until tomorrow. But yeah, it's going all over the place as far as. Fortunately, we got plenty of bottles, got half decent amount of chemicals and all that, so hopefully it won't get any worse as far as that's concerned. But then the tariffs are going to affect a whole bunch of other stuff.
Well, the tariffs, kind of bring up the other somewhat unknown as to what might necessarily happen politically or within the government. We know that some of the things that are happening with budget cuts are having an impact on groups like Safer Choice
Yeah.
and our mutual friend of all three of us, Dr. Gavin McGregor Skinner, has been really active with that, with the grant, the $1.2 million grant for PA New
Yeah.
York. And Alejandra, I know you were involved with that too. I've seen you post things where you're working directly with Gavin on that program. So those are some of the things that we don't know about, and they might have an impact on things. The CDC has also been threatened by the budget cuts, and that's impacted some of the disease detectives. I always consider myself an amateur hobbyist disease detective, Scott, just for the record. But and then beyond that, the EPA has been threatened too with budget cuts.
Yeah.
And so, but speaking of the EPA's been also trying to kind of reincorporate discussions about deadlines on the new bilingual labeling requirements. So, Scott, I know you've been researching the heck out of that,
Yeah,
right?
we talked about it briefly on the last show, and I thought it was because we got a notice from one of our raw material suppliers, and I was like, well, where'd this come from? So I didn't really make make a big deal about it, other than we got notice of it, and I think the furthest deadline, I believe I will be retired by the time that comes into play. So, uh, kind of like, well, who cares, right? But then I got another notice from another supplier yesterday. So, that's why we kind of do a slightly deeper dive on this, and particularly with our guest, probably knows more about it than we do. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Like
so
that
how's
was
that
the
for a lead
key
in for a
thing.
more
That
formal
was,
introduction, Mark?
oh man, you set the table for that. So anyway, I know when we were talking about the topics, um, Alejandra came to mind, and I was like, I've got to reach out to her, and if she's willing and able, we've got to have her on as a guest. So Alejandra Gramajo, we're thrilled to have you. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you. You got started off in residential cleaning before really transitioning into the commercial and industrial sector of cleaning. And I know that that put you in a lot of different roles within the ISSA, and now you are like the top guru, top dog in the Latin America Manager. So you're handling everything literally south of the border, the U.S. border, and probably more beyond that since you're bilingual yourself or even multilingual. So you probably have been tasked to do things as it relates to other languages, maybe beyond the Latin American sector. I happen to know that for a fact, but I'm putting it out there as a hypothetical. But anyway, with that, I know that you're supporting all the Spanish speaking membership, and you've been involved with some of the classes that I've taught and helped me there to help guide students that were maybe English as a second language and needed some help and guidance. So I'm thrilled about that. I know you have your own podcast show. You'll tell us a little bit about that, right?
Yeah.
And with that, let me say, hey, Jancast.com audience, please help me welcome Alejandra. Yay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and I'm so happy. And I love the introduction. Thank you. Yeah, so I do have a webcast, web series with ISSA, and it's for the Spanish speaking audience, not just specifically for Latin America. And Jeff gave me the opportunity to basically mimic what he's doing for the Spanish speaking audience. So we're excited with that.
What, give us the name.
Hablando limpio y claro. So it's
Okay.
like straight talk, but in Spanish.
Oh, okay.
How
Nice.
do people find that?
Yeah, I'll put the link on YouTube, but it's part of our ISSA Media YouTube channel.
We'll top that. We'll put the link on our jancast.com notes.
Yeah, that's
Awesome.
right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So I know that.
we just recently went old school back to getting the audio version of our show. We made a big, at the very beginning we could only do audio because the file, you couldn't do anything with the files, but then we transitioned to video. But now it's like more people, want to listen to podcasts when they're driving or cutting the grass or whatever. So now you can get it on iTunes or Spotify or whatever. So yeah, we have a much broader audience there, potentially at least.
And we found a new statistic. 45% of frontline custodial workers listen to podcasts while they're doing their work. That
Oh,
was in ISSA Media.
Yeah.
So I wanted to check in with Jeff Cross to see where he got that stat because I like it.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
So
So I know
how do you
that.
feel about this timeline that we've got out to 2030? As I said, I'll be retired by the time we have to put that in place. But lot of potential work, and there's a lot of details to this whole thing that if you really read into it, it's not quite as terrible as you think it is from a labeling standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. And actually I think it all started with like the agricultural disinfecting process. And I think that's where they wanted to start the whole like bilingual labeling just to make sure that they're reading the labels and understanding the labels because as you know, there's a big percentage of Spanish speaking audience that English is their second language, and they are the ones that are the frontline employees that are actually utilizing the products, you know, and so it's good for them to actually be able to understand the labels. And I was at the EPA conference in DC back in December, and they were even saying like if they can not only translate the labels to Spanish or any other language, right? But actually translate it to words that we can actually understand, right? Because we're not all scientists and we don't know like the big words that they use and what they actually mean. So it's not just about really translating it to a language, but like to basic, not big words, right?
Right.
Uh, to actually really understand and not be able to um kind of like even if it's in your language and you read it and it's like, okay, I still don't know what that means, right?
Well, typically in the past, when we used to try to do translation services as compared to hiring somebody to do it, you know, you could do it through Google and a couple others, but it created wording that didn't make, aside from the scientific part, it created wording that didn't make any sense at all if you were Spanish. Is something like ChatGPT any better, in your opinion, for doing translation services versus, because we're all going to have to deal with this, and we can
Right.
get into what
Right.
the requirements are. But the first thing is, well, who do you get to do the translation?
Yeah. So, ChatGPT is one of my favorites. I do use Copilot a lot, with ISSA, but I feel like ChatGPT, you can actually like talk to it and just kind of tell them like, hey, this is me, this is how I talk, and based on how you, and I'm not an expert, okay, but based on like how you kind of like give them or give ChatGPT the description of who you are and like where do you work at and things like that, like, you know, it will be able to give you more, um, like I guess more detail or like more customized to like how you would want them to give you this stuff. But yeah, I always proofread any translation that I make anyway, just because, you know, it's always something missing or personal touch. It's always necessary. Yeah.
I know I've used Google Translate in the past to do some things years ago, and had folks tell me how far off it
Mhm.
really was. So what Google Translate was doing was kind of converting every individual word rather than looking what the message of the sentence was. And I think that's your point
Yeah.
is like, you know, you really want somebody to be able to understand the concept of what the warning might be or what the hazard might be. So I know this is really all about human health and safety, you know, and that's you know, there's nothing really that should supersede human health and safety when it comes to our frontline workers and those of us that are involved with the chemistries themselves too. I know that the agricultural community was also impacted by this too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And I think their products is gonna pass right now in 2025 in December. That's when they're gonna start requiring the Spanish label on their disinfectants. But and I mean, honestly, it goes like beyond that, like also education, I think. Like if you kind of like train your employees to like always read the label no matter what,
Yeah.
because labels change all the time and you know, the improvements and like sometimes, you know, like you may be able to use this product for this, but now that this is in it, like you might not be able to use it or, you know, be cautious with how you use it. So I think it's a matter of goes back to training, not only the having the label there in Spanish, but also training your employees to like make sure to like always read the label.
I know some of the pushback that I've heard through the industry on this whole piece has to do with labels that are very, very detailed and have a ton of text. And the big question is, how do you do that in two different languages without like getting a bound book and attaching it to the bottle the
Yeah.
way you get a prescription at the drugstore? So,
Right.
have you heard any comments about how? And the last thing you want to do is have it in like, you know, 4-point text where you need to use a magnifying glass to read it. So, do you know how people have anybody made any comments to you about that?
Well, like I know that they're saying that they're gonna start using like QR codes and where you can scan it, but then there's always that argument that people are don't have a phone or there's no service or there's no internet and so I mean, I always say go back old school, have like your, sheets printed out and start there. I mean, and again, it all becomes a habit of actually reading the label because I feel like a lot of people don't actually read it.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think you're right there. I know that's really been the crux of a lot of the ISSA training curriculum has been, there's an awful lot related to process, and that is how to properly use something, and that's generally identified in the label. Here's how you use it. Scott and I used to joke about it back in 2020. People would say, "Wait, what? Dwell time for disinfectant?
What,
What's
you have to
that?"
wait?
It's like it's always been there. You gotta.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. When I was working at the residential business that I used to work with, I would tell the girls, I'm like, hey, let the Clorox do the work. Let the chemical work. Like they would just spray and like start scrubbing. I'm like, just give it a second. Let it
Yeah.
work. Let it, sizzle up and then go in there and use your scrubber or whatever it is that you're using. But yeah, no. It's we got to let the chemical do its work too.
Yep.
I know
So,
that one of the pieces I was researching on this topic was whether or not there was going to be any suggestions coming out from the EPA regarding format on how everybody is going to do their labels. Because right now, I think it's like the Wild Wild West. Anybody can kind of do their label any which way they want. And have you heard anything more about that?
No, in reference to format, I haven't really
yeah,
heard.
I have some info on that because that was one of our concerns is
I thought you
yeah.
did.
EPA labels have a lot of stuff on them to start with, and then it's like, how do you fit a QR code in or not? And the raw material suppliers, I think they all met up at the diner down the street because the correspondence I got from one compared to the other was essentially exactly the same. So they're going to provide a QR code to the master label. So if you don't understand how it works, the raw material suppliers in most cases pay the money to do all the research and development to get their products approved, but they don't actually make the finished product. They then sell raw material to people like Bullen. So we buy the quad or whatever it happens to be, citric acid, and then we make the product. So the both of those companies are saying put this QR code on your product label that's going to take somebody to a web link that's going to have the master label. And what the master label is everything you could possibly say about a particular product. And a typical master label might be 20 pages long. It's got everything under the sun. And then people like Bullen get to choose, okay, which parts of this label do we focus on? Because it might have like a barbicide claim for disinfecting your combs. Well, if I'm not selling to a barber, I don't want that on my label. But the QR code that the raw material people is taking you to a master label for a product that has no connection with whatever the name is of your product. It's taken, so it would go to, let's say, a XYZ company and be R82. So your customer that's used to buying Scott's Cleaner disinfectant goes to this website and it says R82. What I don't know what R82 is because that's not my product. So that isn't going to work. You can have your own QR code to something else, but the best news, well, first off, let me back up. The bilingual labeling currently only applies to safety and cautionary information. It doesn't apply to how you actually use the product, what the dilution is, what the claims are. None of that is required currently to be translated. But you have to like keep out of reach of children, signal words, all that stuff has to be translated. So you can also provide a link on the label, so you could have a one line saying, for bilingual information, click here, and that would take you to Bullen's website where we would have the Spanish or whatever the particular language is that's specified at that time. So it's pretty problematic, but fortunately we're early in here. But You're right, Alejandra. The agricultural products do seem to be coming up first, and then we have a year and a half until we actually put it in place for certain products. So yeah, there's a lot of logistical stuff has to be taken care of to make this work.
One of the other comments that I heard about the challenge is that it's even confusing for manufacturers because there's so many different categories of EPA registered products, and they all have their own deadlines.
Yeah.
They're not the same deadlines, right? So it becomes a big question of does this fit into this category two or category one, or what is the real deadline? And that was one of the other comments that I had seen
Yeah.
researching the topic, that it's little cloudy as to
Yeah,
what
so yeah, I agree
what and when.
100% because it has restricted use pesticides. They're the first ones. Those were December 29th of 2025, and agricultural products, same date, but who knows what those are? So what we're going to do at Bullen is every one of our disinfectants will figure out what the category is they're in, and then put the timeline specific to those products, and we can send that to our private label customers so they know what they have to do. Because it's easy to think about, okay, what's Bullen do for our brands? What do we do for what's somebody in Ohio that has two or three private label disinfectant products? What do they do? Because they have to comply with this regulation as well. There's yeah, a lot of unknowns going forward.
Is this the kind of stuff that you find yourself getting deeply involved with, Alejandra? Is
Yeah.
it everybody wants to know, like, hey, how do I say this and how do I do that?
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing that I love, that I'm like ex putting myself out there and just getting involved with everybody, because I feel like, there's a lot of things that are a lot of things that we need to update in our industry, and little by little I think we'll make a change and a difference.
I have a question for you. One of the things that I remember from years back is that a lot of European countries would kind of defer to EPA as the guiding uh, regulatory body or guiding best practices. And I'm curious, is that the same with Latin America? Yeah, or do these countries have their own regulatory bodies, or do they defer to the EPA?
Yeah, no, unfortunately we don't. In Latin America, we don't have any, you know, perhaps like small per government or per country, but not as a region, and not as strong as the EPA. So a lot of the things that I hear, that I am like aware of and things like that, I always try to like share with the region, and there are a lot of like US companies that have their off some offices in Latin America, so of course they enforce that, but I always try to share it all the way down the region.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. As you both know, I've been very involved with the standards committees, and what's been popping up an awful lot on the standards committees has to do with the fact that there's a lot of countries on planet Earth that don't have their own regulatory bodies related to disinfectants, for example. I mean, Canada has DIN and the US has EPA, but a lot of other countries throughout the world just rely on what the EPA's guidance is.
Right.
And so I believe that this is how this will get enacted throughout Latin America, is because it's being driven through the US EPA, even though they don't really have authority in Latin America,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, there are no standards either. And ISSA, we've translated them in different languages so that they can have access to them, and kind of start, and that's my goal, to kind of like educate and standardize the region, little by little.
So I have
Great.
a question for you, Alejandra.
Yes, tell
Hey,
me.
did anybody ever ask you to like create a, a transcript for maybe a worldwide popular podcast so that people could see the transcripts in Spanish? Just curious,
Yeah.
hypothetically. Did anybody ever ask you that?
No, they have not, but I think with the technology, you can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
I
right.
think I think it will be able to. I think with technology you'll be able to do it with AI for sure.
Yeah, unless you have friends in high places.
I think there is some
Hey,
technology that we could actually do a video translation, so it kind of dubs in the translation. But we'll have to see. Well, really good stuff. So, are you prepared to accept emails from people that want to know how ISSA can help them? This is kind of like she's taken over for Bill Balick, who used to be my contact at ISSA for all things regulatory and everything else. Now we can say, oh, you got a question about the Spanish, the bilingual labeling. Well, you need to talk to Alejandro.
Yes, yes,
oh,
yes. Please, please. I'll share my information. You can put it on
Yep.
the description, and please
Yep.
reach out to me with anything with ISSA. I'm involved in everything. You can ask all my colleagues. I'm always asking them questions, and they're so kind. So, yes.
Cool. Good. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I think it's been a great show, and I know it was kind of last minute, but all this news is just happening, so we really appreciate you being able to join us here for this Jancast.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you, Mark, for thinking of me. I appreciate it.
Good.
thank you.
Okay. Well, happy spring
Yes, yes. Not
or
looking
summer,
forward
whatever.
to the allergies, but I'll take the warm weather.
You got it. Okay. Thank you very much. See you
Okay,
All
all.
right.
bye.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
everybody.
Tune in to Jancast time to clean the air. Sparkling ideas, you're aware. From the floors to the sky, let's make it new. Jancast will see this mission through. Jancast.com, where clean begins. Podcasting dreams where fresh winds. Eco thoughts and healthy spins. Jancast.com, let's dive in. Dust off the doubts and shine the day. Insights clear to light our way. From scrub to eco tips, bright and true. Jancast here for me and you. Jancast.com, where clean begins. Podcasting dreams where fresh winds. Eco thoughts and healthy spins. Jancast.com, let's dive in. Dust off the doubts and shine